In a new age world filled with delusions and wish fulfillment by morons in need of attention, renowned experiencers of high strangeness and podcasters Jeffrey Ritzman and Jeremy Vaeni received invitations to a tropical paradise getaway called Paratopia. Little did they know, it was the same type of new age spiritual retreat they've been avoiding all their lives.
Paratopia, it's Jeremy Vaeni, it's Jeff Ritzman. I know that Jeff and I have sort of grown famous for whining about ufology, but Phil Imbrogno is with us today, and he is one of the good ones. And I figured out, Phil, why I like you so much. And it's because you actually like to teach, which means that you like to learn, which means that your theories have grown over time, and you don't just sort of steadfastly hold to one thing.
Yeah, well, you have to grow and take in the information and see where it goes. And I think one of the problems in ufology especially is that people get locked in to what they believe. And even though the evidence changes, they still want to feel secure and locked in that they're the expert in that particular field, and it has to be what they say. So, in ufology, especially today, there's a lot of egos in conflict with each other. But, I tell people really open out, I'm not sure what this whole damn thing is about. I'm just out there collecting information, and, I begin to realize that this is, very, very complex. Mm-hmm. And you can't be locked into one particular idea, especially when it comes to the UFO phenomena.
Mm-hmm. And to that end, your new book is called Files from the Edge, A Paranormal Investigator's Explorations into High Strangeness.
Yeah, but it's not a UFO book.
Okay, it's
That's the amazing thing about it. When people usually hear my name, all my previous books except for one, Celtic Mysteries, they were all about UFOs. I mean, I started out, in a book with J. Allen Hynek, Night Siege, the Hudson Valley UFO sightings. And I guess, my name being attached to J. Allen Hynek with that book, people say, the ghost hunters and all the paranormal investigators are going now. They're saying, what business does Phil have to be about paranormal investigation? He investigates UFOs. And the thing is that UFOs are paranormal. And Files from the Edge is a collection of paranormal investigations that I've done, that I've been part of over the years. And I just filed them away in my binders. And I have like 50 binders filled with paranormal information. The thing is that when you investigate UFOs, all of this other strange stuff keeps on coming forward, and you really don't know what to do with them for years, especially back in the 70s when I started collecting all this information. And the thing is that, you realize that a lot of this paranormal stuff is all centered around the UFO phenomena, and in a way it's all related.
So when you say all related, is it directly related in that those binders of files that you're talking about, are they from UFO cases having to do with seemingly other paranormal topics?
Yeah, most of them are from UFO cases, and some people who, Hynek used to call the cases high strangeness. And they're high strangeness because UFO investigators never really knew how to deal with them. And the majority of them still don't know how to deal with them today. And they usually just get filed away or ignored. But they came about and were collected as a result of UFO cases. They came in on the side, and they were an offshoot of a major UFO sighting, because when UFOs appear in an area, all of a sudden, all this other strange phenomena starts breaking out all over the place. You have, all of a sudden people start claiming abductions, seeing apparitions. People start having electromagnetic phenomena in their house. People start seeing strange creatures, monsters almost, shadow people, and so on and so on and so on. So when you have a large number of UFO sightings in an area, shortly after, all of this stuff breaks out. And most UFO investigators ignore them because they're still locked in the idea of contacting ET.
Well, how did that start in the first place? I mean, if this was always the case all along, that these things were broader and stranger and richer, how did they get whittled down to the ET narrative?
That's a good story. I think it stems back to the 50s, where the Project Blue Book, Project Grudge, Project Sign, early in the UFO game, the government was actually looking for a sign that these things were from outer space. And they sent out, people to collect reports. And they collected them in a very cold, not even scientific fashion, but very. That method of investigation was carried to the civilians, and they copied that in the early APRO investigators back in the 50s and NICAP investigators. And the whole concept was, extraterrestrial. It was played upon that these things were without extraterrestrial. Movies came out in the 50s, especially, that focused on the interest that the public had in UFO sightings, and all of these movies, their theme was that these unidentified flying objects, flying saucers, were extraterrestrial. So it was just carried from that presentation by the media to people investigating UFOs today. And
well, the people who are investigating UFOs in the inner rim, I mean, would you? I guess I'm just asking. I'm not trying to make an accusation when I say, would you say that if the public interest and the government interest in UFOs was because they suspected, if it ain't us, it's aliens, that then researchers on their own tailored the narrative to play to that because that's what they could sell to the public? I mean, is that what you're saying?
Well, this is what interests them, to get into UFO research, the mystery and the possibility that UFOs are aliens from another star system. So, I mean, they carry that into their investigations, and their objectivity is in question now, because you had UFO researchers in the 50s and 60s going, even today, when they go on a case, there's no objectivity there in many of these researchers, that they go out there with the assumption that the person saw an alien spaceship. Mm-hmm. And if it can't be explained, it must be an alien spaceship. And even Alan Hynek in his later life, started saying he'd be very disappointed if these things turned out to be nothing more than somebody's spaceships from another star system. He believed that the answer was more exotic than that.
When you see these government documents, the one from the Freedom of Information Act, either gathered from that or perhaps even just the fake ones that people put out there, and it's all about this ET stuff. Do you think that the real documents, the real ones that they're keeping from us, are speaking about ET, or do you think they're speaking about, we don't know what the hell this is?
Well, I think that the documents that, we're not seeing is actually their real opinion as to what's going on. And you're talking about fake documents. I mean, there's quite a few of them on the internet. And I remember reading one and I can't remember, I'm not going to name any names or so on and so on, but, the government, it was from, a person who was some big shot in the government, and he had a background from Harvard and everything like that, and he was talking about UFOs being here, and it was like he was a government official putting a memo through. There were so many grammatical errors and so many misspellings in that letter. I mean, come on, some person just typed it up. I mean, many of those documents on the internet, I mean, you just can't even accept them as being fact. Let me tell you something, despite the size of the United States government, it's very departmentalized, and it's, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. The third finger on the right hand doesn't know what the fourth finger on the right hand is doing. Mm-hmm. And so on and so on. So, you have very, very small groups that are specialized in researching certain things that they want nobody else to know. Because the government is big enough so that if too many people know, eventually it's going to leak out into the population or, other governments and so on and so on. So when you're dealing with something as radical and as secret as the UFO phenomena and paranormal phenomena, there are very small sections of the government that are dealing with this, and they're probably, paramilitary, military sections of the government that are primarily doing this, and they really don't even have to answer to anyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, you co-wrote a book called Contact of the Fifth Kind, which is about the possibility that the government has traded technology for aliens to be able to abduct humans. Do you stand by that?
Not really. I just offer it as one of the stories that's out there. And, when we talk about an alien intelligence, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're ET and spaceships from Zeta Reticuli, although that may be the case for some of the UFO sightings. But we're also could be dealing with another intelligence that's in the same sort of space as us, but in another dimensional sort of existence, another parallel reality. And, with the new ideas in theoretical physics, this is becoming more and more and more of a possibility that, researchers have to accept. And you just can't say, another dimension. Most people don't even know what another dimension means. I mean, if you look at the theories that are out there now being proposed by theoretical physicists that are incredibly well respected in the field, and you start applying that to the emanation or the sightings of and reports of paranormal phenomena, you can see, wow, a lot of that makes sense, because now, they're even considering that some of these dimensions, it's not out of the question that they could be inhabited by some type of living being, intelligent or otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a bit of physics that you know off the top of your head that we can look into? Because we've actually asked an astrophysicist, and we didn't like what we heard. He seemed to give us sort of, well, here's how it would work, but then there wasn't really any physics behind it. It was just sort of like saying, well, if you want to know how UFOs work, figure out how remote viewing works.
Well, one of the proponents of the idea of parallel realities is Max Tegmark up at MIT. And, he went through all these equations, and in these equations, just by accident, going into string theory, is that all of these equations and predictions of parallel dimensions in our own space and time kept on popping up. Mm-hmm. And the thing is you have to remember that in physics, in astrophysics, and so on, astronomy, that most of the discoveries were theoretically made on the blackboard before they were confirmed and discovered in space. So we're seeing the same thing now. These people up at MIT, University of California, Caltech, and so on, they are predicting in these equations the existence of parallel universes. And now, with these super colliders that are available, they're actually starting to see the result of the collision of particles and proving that there are other dimensions. For example, when you have particles collide, hadrons, particles, protons, they break up into a number of particles. Now, the thing is that some of these particles are exceeding such a great velocity, and their vectors are so radical that, unlike some of the other particles which are heavier, which are going across the screen of the detection plate, some of these particles are just disappearing. And the only explanation for that is they're going into spatial dimensions in which we cannot perceive, being three-dimensional beings. So, the idea is pretty sound, the idea that there are 11 dimensions out there. We're the room you're sitting in, the room I'm sitting here. We look into space around us, but there's other spaces there, other areas, physical spaces, in which we cannot turn to get into because it tells us by the equations it's located at a right angle to a right angle, just in the next dimension, not to mention all 11 dimensions that are predicted to exist. Now, this was first brought out in string theory, that you can have all these dimensions existing. However, right now the theory has been modified, and it's called the M theory, and that all of these strings are attached to a fabric of space, which is like a membrane. And the proof of these other dimensions also exist in gravity. Okay? Gravity is one of the four forces. It's the weakest force. Theoretically, gravity should be the strongest force when you consider the mass of the sun, the mass of Earth, the planets, Jupiter, and so on, the galaxy, and so on, black holes, and whatever. But it seems that the graviton, which is a theoretical particle of gravity that carries the force of gravity, as it's leaving the sun, these gravitons reaching the Earth, the number of gravitons reduces considerably. And they're thinking now that this is because gravity is actually filtering through multi-dimensions before it reaches the Earth. And that's why the effects of gravity are weaker, much weaker than they should be. So this is all pretty exciting stuff because you have to remember that ancient people of long ago, especially the Hindu religion, they talked about parallel realities, universes that have their own laws, their own gods, their own worlds, their own types of people, and so on. They've been saying that for 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years. And now it seems that modern science is starting to catch up with that idea. And I think that we have to look at the idea of string theory, the M theory, parallel universes, and so on, alternate dimensions, as a very strong possibility for the origin of what we're calling today the supernatural or paranormal phenomena.
Do you you must speak with some physicists in your day-to-day doings, yeah?
Do I?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I go back and forth up to MIT.
So do they agree generally or no that this has anything to do or any sort of answer for paranormal supernatural activity?
Well, some of them are very intrigued by it, but professionally they won't put themselves on the line. Some of them will say, yeah, it's very possible that in these other dimensions are we don't know it's there. I mean, there's a space there. There's something there we don't know. At first, we thought that these other dimensions that exist around us are like folded over in the size of an atom or the size, of your fist or so on and so on. But, it's beginning to look like these other dimensions are large spaces. But then on the other hand, you say, they know, for example, up there that I'm involved with UFOs and paranormal phenomena. And during one of my defending my thesis up there, I was told to come back when I wanted to do real science. So, but it took me a lot longer. I mean, to get the graduate degree there, but it's going to happen sooner or later. But probably happen this fall. But there is a resistance, yes. But there is a core of young physicists up there, and some of the more established ones that are very cautious about what they say when it deals with paranormal phenomena and UFOs, because they realize that there's something there, but there's also a lot of bullshit. Mm-hmm. And a lot of wild-eyed thinking and people thinking that they have encounters when they don't. You have to remember that, some people, they want to believe that they had encounters with aliens. They want to believe that they had some type of supernatural experience. Many people want to believe that they've been specially chosen for this experience, for this experience that they've had. But all in all, many of these people want to believe too much. And, Alan Hynek said something to me one time. He says, remember, when you're out interviewing these people, you always have to think, is the witness actually telling you what they actually experienced? Word for word. Mm-hmm. Because people who have experiences like this, and they're pretty sure that they saw something strange, they don't want to be made a fool of and saying, you saw the planet Venus or something like that. You don't have a poltergeist in your house, it's just the pipes in your house rattling. So as you're interviewing them, in some cases, they do embellish their experience. So, a really good researcher has to be able to, pull out this information. And this doesn't mean that the people are lying or they're fabricating a hoax. It just means that, human recollection of an event like that is sometimes flawed. Mm-hmm. And they tend to add things that necessarily didn't have happened, but not to that extreme. For example, in the early days of UFO research, when people saw, elliptical-shaped lights in the sky and so on, and you asked them to draw what they saw, being influenced by the media that these things are spaceships from another world, when they start making their drawings, they start adding things that they think should be there, that they think they remember, like, windows and antenna maybe sometime even, and some type of landing gear or something, but, information it doesn't, other people, independent witnesses who saw this, didn't see it.
Mm-hmm. And does that work the other way too, where if an experience of theirs is too highly strange, they'll tone it down?
They might at the beginning, because they don't want to look like some type of nut. But then again, we're talking about a credible person who had a credible experience. If a person never had an interest in all of the paranormal, whether it's UFOs or whatever it is, if they never had an interest and they have an experience, the first part is that they will try to forget it. The second part is they will try to find answers and then finally try to seek somebody out. When they talk to a person for the first time, they're very conservative about what they say until they feel the person out. And you may have to do several interviews before you get all the information out from a witness like this. And they have no idea what they saw. They can tell you exactly the experience that they had, and eventually they will, when they get trust in you, when they're more trusted in you, and they get to know you better, they will start relating things that they did not tell you during the first interview. Now, there's another type of witness that totally believes in all this and goes out at night and looking for stuff, goes to channelers and whatever, and they will embellish their experience because now they're all part of, this great thing that's unfolding that they feel, and they have an opinion as to what they experienced, even though they really have no idea. Also, the way a witness a witness who has a paranormal experience more or less tries to deal with it. They will draw upon their education, their cultural upbringing, their spirituality, even their religion, to try to make sense as to what they experienced. So reports sometimes are influenced by these four factors. How a person reports a paranormal or UFO experience does depend upon their education, does depend upon their culture, does depend upon their spirituality, their religious beliefs, and so on and so on. All of these their upbringing, all of these factors determine how a person reports an experience.
Mm-hmm. I just want to go back to one thing here, which is your colleagues at MIT. Could you know all the paranormal hotspots in New York? Could you not invite them out?
Yeah, but they wouldn't go.
Not even if you made a bet? I mean, there's nothing you could do to get them to come out and just say, see for yourself.
There are some people who are interested in, going out and doing things, but it's like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force him to drink. I mean, there are also, many people who are saying, that are in the scientific world, that this is all a bunch of nonsense. Mm-hmm. So, when you're in a professional position, and they take it slow. Science is always slow with change, okay? And if anybody comes forward with a radical idea, usually they are attacked. And the thing is that I had discussions with a number of people from, various scientific departments, and they would say to me, oh, yeah, there's no truth in that, and so on. It's just a bunch of... I said, wait a minute now. Have you ever researched that particular UFO sighting? For example, I'll give you the Hudson Valley UFO. Oh, yeah, that was just airplanes in formation. Where did you get that information, I would say? Oh, yeah, I read it in the paper. Did you investigate the Hudson Valley UFO sightings? I would say to them. They said, no. Did you talk to the witnesses, people who, excellent credentials, experiences, and about their experiences, and they're, very well-educated people who saw something truly incredible? No, I didn't talk to anybody about it. I said, well, it doesn't sound very scientific to me that you would come to an opinion without even looking into this.
But don't you think that there's something to be said for expecting whatever paper they read to be telling them the truth?
Well, that's what that's what, people in America think. If they see it on TV or if they read it in the paper, it's the truth. And I think that stems back to, World War II days. Yeah. But the thing is that, to say something doesn't exist if you haven't determined if it does or does not exist for yourself, to me, that's not very scientific. Mm-hmm. And for example, the stone chambers, the balanced rock, an archaeologist in Connecticut. Oh, the balanced rock, that's a glacial erratic. It was propped up there by the glaciers 18,000 years ago. I said, how do you know that? He said, well, I've seen... I said, have you ever been out to that balanced stone and really studied the way those pedestal stones are placed in the ground and the way that stone is placed on top of those 6 pedestal stones? No, I've never been out there to see it. Well, how can you make that assumption, I'm saying?
Yeah, I've been out there, and that's absolutely placed on there. I don't see how that could just happen.
This is the mentality still that you get in science. There's a large number of the old guard still in control. And they determine, like the priests of Babylon a long time ago, what is the truth and what is not the truth, what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. If you don't follow the scientific method, you can't. It's ridiculous. You didn't do anything. Well, paranormal phenomena has nothing to do with the scientific method. I'm sorry. Scientific method was based on experimentation and observation of physical interactions in the world. In the paranormal phenomena, if we're dealing with other dimensions, this is not part of our physical world. So therefore, the scientific method breaks down. It does not apply. And we have to modify it to study the new ideas of the multiverse.
So what do you do then to study and to make sense of all of this stuff? How do you determine, for instance, even a real case from a bogus case? How do you parse out all of the various bits of information?
You know, as time goes on, it's getting harder and harder. And one of the reasons is that people in our society are troubled. They're worried about the future. There's just so many people with, so many radical ideas that many people are trying to escape. And they will, embellish on experiences that they have because it does take them out of their sometimes troubled existence or mundane existence. What I'm seeing now today are very few people who are fabricating cases, but there are people who have had experiences that aren't that amazing at all. They may have an experience that's totally explainable, but yet they don't want to be told that it's explainable. They want to be told that they had a unique paranormal experience. So, you go out there and you collect information, and you hope that, you catch something or observe whatever they're observing. But it's a lengthy process. And it usually, if someone's fabricating something, each time you go and visit them, the story becomes more fantastic, because after a while they see that they're starting to lose your interest, and so they think they have to, add something more incredible, and the story keeps on getting more fantastic every time, and so it's still very hard, especially with photographs and things like that today. It's so easy to fake them. I have never seen so many videos of UFOs and photographs of UFOs and other paranormal phenomena pop up so much on the internet. And, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm saying, you got to be kidding me. I mean, it's just like Hollywood special effects.
Mm-hmm.
Phil, I got to ask, and I'll probably put these to you one at a time to get your take. I just want to tell you some of the stuff that I've noticed over the years, because I believe, like you do, that this is the UFO thing is a paranormal phenomena. I don't see it as nuts and bolts all the time. But one of the things that I've seen about it and the way it seems to behave is that it always seems to have what I call an escape hatch that always lends it a certain amount of ridiculousness or a certain amount of self-denial in the way that it might present itself. And I'm curious if just as an example, you have someone come to you who says that they saw a craft that for all intent and purposes was a hoaxed craft taken a picture of in the 70s or something like that, but they swear up and down this is what I saw. There seems to be this built-in deniability that it gives itself, and I'm curious if you've come across that in any case that you've worked on.
Yeah, I have, and this is where, for example, people try to add add information to what they saw, what they think they saw. So they will look at pictures and say, oh, yeah, look just like that. And if you question them further and say, well, did you see this, or did you just see a glowing object? Oh, it was just glowing. Well, why are you pointing to this picture when this picture is obviously metallic looking? And, they'll say, well, it was shaped that way, but did you actually see any reflection or metal? No, I didn't. But this is what it looked like, the shape. I mean, you get things like that all the time. I mean,
right.
There will hold pictures and from the internet now of UFOs because of what they saw. So most of the time, people are like programmed to think that UFO automatically means a spaceship from another world. So they try to feel comfortable with what they saw to identify it as such. More people would like to say, yes, it was a spaceship rather than say it was an unknown.
Right.
But there are many people who will say, I don't know what the hell I saw. I'd never seen anything like that before.
How about something in terms of, I think what Valet has said, I think what a lot of people have said, that to describe the experience of a sighting or of contact with others in a complete 100% open, honest way would be to essentially render the entire experience absurd, because so much of it is so far beyond a UFO sighting per se, or a ghost sighting or something like that, that to really convey this open and honestly with 100% accuracy would be to be thought a fool. I mean, is that not the same type of escape hatch that this thing seems to present to us over and over and over?
Yeah, I think so.
Why do you think that is? I mean, I know that's an impossible question, but just in your guesstimation, I mean, if we're talking about something that's potentially interdimensional or ultra-dimensional or whatever you want to say, I have to wonder if it's not just that, but that it also plays on. I've always thought that we've had much more to do with this phenomena than we dared think of. That we may have some kind of influence on how it manifests to us, or how we perceive it, or that we can't perceive it, and therefore our mind is filling in the blanks, that type of thing. But there always seems to be that escape hatch in this whole thing that we'll never be able to quite be able to lay our hands on it.
Yeah, this is what I've been saying for years. Mm-hmm. I mean, in my last book, Interdimensional Universe, I have a chapter called The Trick of the Magician. And we can't possibly perceive and understand what is being manifested. And whatever is manifesting, unless it shows us exactly how the trick is done, we're like children in the audience watching a magician. We just try to interpret and understand what we're seeing, but we still don't understand what's happening, but we try to make sense of it. So when you get people coming forward with experiences, like I said before, the way they relate the experience depends a lot upon, a number of factors, including their religious beliefs, education, and so on. And yes, this other whatever it is, let's say in this dimension that's very close to us, can also, it seems, manifest. We seem to have a part in it, and it takes on different forms or different shapes and manifests in different way as we expect to perceive it.
Okay.
So, this is, this is all going into this area now where ufology is moving into more of a hardcore paranormal science rather than being separate for years as ufologists looking for spaceships from another world.
Right.
So what the answer is, I can theorize and say, yes, we can apply the new physics to this, we can apply string theory to this, but what the manifestations represent, I don't think anybody really can say that they know for sure.
No.
Because the magician behind this has not shown us the trick.
Right.
So we're left with trying to interpret it ourselves. And we end up, misidentifying it for so many years now.
Well, what would you say the effect is of what we've seen so far, and would you say that it has evolved with us over time, or perhaps evolved us over time?
Yeah, I think it more or less manifested it according to how we want to perceive it, which would be indicating intelligence. And, if you look into some of the very ancient legends, they talk about these parallel dimensions with other beings living in them. Is it so hard to believe that if these other spatial areas exist around us, that someone is not in there, some type of entity, some type of being that has existed probably before human beings have walked on this planet? It's just not too hard to accept now that, physicists are telling us that, these areas do exist. And people continue to report paranormal phenomena, especially UFOs, strange creatures. I was just looking into researching a number of houses up in Putnam County that have been experiencing manifestations of all different types of phenomena. And this is on the rise, on the increase. And most of this stuff seems like it's emitting from another dimension that's there. It's not in the same physical space. So, when that happens, you have no control over what's going on. These manifestations appear out of nowhere, and these people don't even feel secure in their homes anymore.
Phil, do you look at when you're studying a case per se, do you look at the individual, like what is going on in their life at that point in time? What kind of changes has their life gone through? What kind of in-between state are they in? Do you ever go that deep with a witness?
Oh, yeah.
We've had George Hansen on this. Yeah, we've had George Hansen on the show. That's the reason I ask, is that, he mentions that a lot of paranormal activity surrounds times of change or things being done out of routine, a lot of chaos in someone's life, a lot of stress in someone's life, something like that will, in turn, they are ripe for sort of a paranormal experience of some kind.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean. That has happened in the past. There have been cases where there has been, especially a lot of rock throwing and things like that, paranormal experience manifestations and so on, that have evolved on troubled times, especially in very young people. But also, on the other hand, people who have moved into, let's say, a new home, the paranormal experiences now start to generate anxiety and anger between a couple. So there seems to be some type of energy that's feeding into these people's emotions, making them fearful, anger, and start fighting with each other. There are several cases over the last several years where people have moved into, let's say, a haunted house, a very happily married couple that in a short period of time of after moving in, within 2 years, actually started fighting with each other and actually got divorced.
Yeah.
And this was centered on the manifestation of the paranormal phenomena.
Yeah, and see, something like that, George Hansen, I can hear him right now in the back of my head saying that's absolutely what should be happening in a case like that, because these people are living in an atmosphere of anti-structure, that they're, anti-structure and the paranormal seem to go hand in hand, and therefore that kind of thing is certainly not good for a relationship. This is why, I think I actually wrote him an email one time about so many people in ufology that I've met at one point are married, and the next time you see them a year later, they're divorced, they're miserable, they're out of work. Let me tell you. You can speak to this. The casualty list is high.
Yeah. And I've had teams of people working with me that ended up in disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any, again, I know why is not a productive question to ask, but does that just go with the territory that, if you're having a paranormal experience or you're having many, that you're going to wind up in such a situation that it's debilitating to one's life?
Well, it depends upon, are we talking about from the investigator or from the experiencer?
Well, I would say let's look at investigators first.
Okay. Well, you see, many investigators get into this because it's fascinating, okay? But to them, it's not a reality. You see, they separate themselves part of it. They are not the witness. They are the investigator. And they more or less, do it as a hobby because they've read a lot of the books about it and they want to get out there. It's fascinating. But when they have an experience themselves and it attaches themselves to that person, they realize that this stuff is very real. And once it becomes real in your mind that there are forces out there that you have no control over, these people become very fearful, and it starts manifesting in anxiety. It affects their job. It affects their personal relationship, family, and so on. So I have seen that happen so many times with UFO researchers, especially those who have worked with me, because I'm really out there in the field.
What about a loss of critical judgment as an investigator is in the field working for years and years? Do you or have you seen people completely lose their critical judgment that used to be very good, competent researchers with critical minds?
I've seen it, yeah. I mean, I've seen it, and I think there's a number of explanations for it. Part of it is because they become so involved after having an experience. And the second part is, I'm not going to point my finger at anybody or say anything, that they get into this and they realize that they could get attention from it. So in order to stay the center of attention, right, they have to make their claims more incredible so that, they get the attention that they want. You have to remember that the majority of people who are investigating UFOs that, have been in the paper, have been on the History Channel or whatever, if it wasn't for UFOs, the majority of these people would be unknowns.
Right.
You see? Right. So many of the people that I've come across over the years, they have to get, they have to bring out more dramatic stuff. And yes, and many of them have even gone overboard because they want to get more incredible and more, as what society is calling for. The idea of having a close encounter now is like pretty dull, put people to sleep. Right. You got to have aliens in there. You got to have abductions. You got to have all this other incredible stuff here.
Right.
So this is why in the UFO field you have these people presenting more and more and more and more incredible evidence, and getting more bizarre and into this whole thing.
Why do you think that there are certain places, like I could take, for instance, Pine Bush, Gulf Breeze, what was Ted Phillips' place, Marley Woods? Why do you think that
Bridgewater Triangle?
Yeah, why does this thing seem to attach itself to physical places sometimes, do you think?
Well, I can tell you that before Dr. Alan Hynek, passed away, we had a conversation, and I asked him the very same question. And he said, look for portals. Mm-hmm. He believed there were places on the planet, and quite a few of them, where these dimensional portals open and close, allowing phenomena to come into our universe, come into our reality, I should say, and leave our reality. And there are a number of places which, in fact, are portals. And this is one of the research I've been doing for a long time now. And not just going out and saying, oh, yes, a portal. People go outside and say vortexes. Most of them don't even know what they're talking about. Yeah. But the thing is that I'm applying changes in the magnetic field, starting magnetic lines of force, not ley lines, because that's a big controversy. Actual magnetic lines of force that are running through the earth, and finding out information why these areas become active from time to time in a cyclic nature with these manifestations. And as a matter of fact, I'm working on a project right now on that. And, in the next couple of years, I'm going to have quite a bit of data. So there are places like that. I believe there are portals to these other dimensions that open up and close. And some of them may be the size of atoms from time to time. Some of them may be a few feet in diameter. We can't see them because there seem to be opening from the other dimensional state. So from our point of view, for the most part, we don't see the opening. But, there are times where people have reported a dark sort of thing appearing or a lighted sort of a circular area, swirling area where something came out of it.
In a certain way of thinking with physics, because I knew nothing of physics, very little, if anything, these UFOs, ghosts, name the phenomena, any of them seem to be fairly fleeting in a physics sense or in a physics mentality or way of thinking about this. Is the reason possibly that these things are so fleeting is because they cannot exist here for too long? Or do you think that there's a whole nother reason to that?
Yeah, well, I believe that our concept of what we can perceive is very limited, and that they are around much longer than we think from what our five senses are telling us.
Okay.
And they could move slightly in and out of phase of these dimensional areas and not be perceived by humans. And sometimes when they move closer to these dimensional membranes, they may only appear like shadows to us.
Okay.
And so from a human perception, we're very limited as to viewing this phenomena. But it seems to me that more people are reporting more experiences for a longer duration than I've seen in the last 30 years.
Do you think that the reason... we talk nuts and bolts, and I, like I said before, I'm not a big nuts and bolts guy when it comes to this. I used to be years ago, but you sooner than later realize it doesn't fit the profile very well. And a lot of people want to talk about physical proof. Everybody wants physical proof of one kind or another. Do you believe, based on what we've talked about here, that physical proof is a hardcore impossibility for this phenomena to leave behind, being as it can be real, quote unquote, to us, and then not real at the same time?
Well, it seems to have the ability to be physical and not physical.
Right.
So, look at the phenomena of angel hair. Associated with UFOs and other paranormal phenomena. I've investigated several cases. I've even seen it myself. And the stuff seems like it's there, and then, by the time, you can really collect it and try to get it to a laboratory, it just vanishes, and there's not even a residue left. So what were you looking at? What were you handling there? Something that had the ability to become physical and then totally non-physical, vaporize into seemingly nothing. Look at all the years that, UFOs, people have been involved with UFOs. They say, well, there's no physical evidence that there's no physical evidence if you want to consider the UFOs are spaceships from another world.
Exactly.
But if you're dealing with something that's more exotic, that, is more like a plasma, and plasmas, by the way, can, with the use of magnetic fields, appear very physical and feel very physical until the magnetic field is altered or dissolved and the plasma is no longer physical. So, we're dealing with a whole new area of study here. And I think that there are a small number of researchers out there that are laying down the foundations for those who are going to follow to really get a handle on this whole UFO paranormal world.
Right. I couldn't help but when you were talking to Jeremy about science and how science will fight you tooth and nail on new discoveries or on discoveries that, I don't know, counteract or are opposed to the commonly held theories of the day. That seems to be precisely what ufology has done for as long as it's been around. The minute that someone would bring in some kind of alternate theory or say that the ETH does not fit a profile that seems logical to what we're looking at or what we're experiencing or examining, that person is the heretic. I mean, we've recently, tackled into a subject that's caught us quite a bit of flack because it doesn't hold true to those studying the abduction phenomena.
I mean, I know. I mean,
how have you dealt with that whole personality / ego / I want it to be true / I don't want it to be true? I mean, where do you get? It just seems like such a befuddled mess. And I mean, I have to be honest, aside from a few people like yourself, I mean, I see ufology as some of the most mush-minded people I've ever seen in my life. I mean, how do you make sense? How do you make it make sense to the people who don't want it to be deeper than little green men from Planet X? I mean, is there a way?
Well, there isn't a way because you said it right there. There's egos on the line. And people are like, trying to say they're right so that they could get the attention. And there's really no element of researchers being cohesive in the exchange of information. You put researchers in a room and they will argue with each other as to who's right. And no one is right, really. But you have to remember also when you're talking about science, and bring this up, that in the 1600s, the idea of rocks falling down from the sky was considered a paranormal event.
Right.
So, I mean, today with science, science does not learn from its mistakes in the past. And today, what people are viewing as paranormal events could possibly be a science at the end of the 21st century. But with UFO investigators, I mean, let me put it this way. If you write a book about UFOs and it doesn't fit in the norm, that book is going to get viciously attacked.
And you with it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you should hear some of the comments that I've gotten in email because of the interdimensional universe, because I go outside thinking of the box about the nuts and bolts thing, and I'm just primarily saying to people, consider this. I mean, I've gotten emails calling me, a nutcase, all the way from being accused of putting information from the government just to confuse people and to go against the extraterrestrial thing. Come on, I mean,
we should exchange some of our emails.
Oh yeah, but
my God.
some of them are, but they're all from people who say they're UFO investigators.
Well,
anytime you write a book on UFOs, at any other subject, you're open to. I mean, extreme criticism. It seems like almost like you're writing some type of radical theory in science that's being attacked by the scientists. The ufologists are guilty of the same thing. John Keel, who was a good friend of mine, and John and I, for many years, we got along. And he said to me one time, what are you hanging around with the UFO people for? They're the lepers of the paranormal.
Amen. Yes. I mean, well, let me ask you this. I mean, you've been in this game a long time. Why do you think it is that ufologists or people who study this in any great depth and write books about it or speak about it in lecture halls or what have you, why do you think that, I mean, unlike, I think, most people who study any given subject, if you study a subject such as, I don't know, why is grass green, and you write a paper on why you think grass is green, and then you figure out you're wrong, and then you republish that paper and say, hey, I was wrong. Look what I found now. Now this is why I think that grass is green. It seems like you get points in science when you do that, but when you're a ufologist or you study any of this paranormal stuff, once you lay into a theory, you better damn sight stick with it, or your ass is going to pay.
Oh,
so I mean, why is this field like that? Why can't a ufologist say, "I was wrong"? I mean, Valet's you've reassessed your views. Valet has reassessed his views.
I was completely wrong about things.
But,
so is Hynek. So is Valet.
Yeah.
I mean, well, the thing is that you get critics because ufology is not a science. Science will say, yes, you made a mistake. We build upon our mistakes to learn. But ufology is viewed upon most radical ufologists and most hardcore ufologists as more of a religion.
Yeah.
Than a science, and that's why. And if you preach the gospel, and then one day you get on TV and say, folks, you've been sending me money, and I've been preaching the gospel a certain way, but I've been wrong about it now. You think people are still going to listen to you?
Right.
And some people accuse you of being in league with the devil. But in ufology, you get accused not of being in league with the devil. You get accused of being in league with the government.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's like the priest coming out from Mass saying, "Wow, we really tore that sermon apart this morning, didn't we?" I mean, I don't know. It just seems like a really it doesn't seem like a field where you're going to get a lot done as a group, unless you kind of twaddle off by yourself and do your own work and basically come forward when you have something to say, and otherwise keep your mouth shut. I mean,
I usually keep a low profile now because the fact is, it's just a mess out there. But you're right. Nothing is going to be done in the UFO field, and mainly because you have a number of individuals, working, doing their own thing, and second of all, there's no core study being done. My opinion, and it almost happened a few years ago. Well, I should say 20 years ago. My gosh, how time goes by. I mean, that if you take, let's say, maybe 10 of, I don't want to say the top people in the field, but 10 individuals, and say, okay, here's $20, $30 million or whatever. You got 5 years to do a complete investigation, objective investigation of the UFO phenomena, and in 5 years, you will write a long paper or book or report on your findings. I think if that's done, and you get the right talent together and the right instrumentation, that definitely it would come up with a conclusion. But you got all of these people working all over the place, finding and getting little pieces of the puzzle. And what's happening is that no one knows where to put that piece of the puzzle to see what the picture's like.
Right.
And some people are actually bringing in their own pieces from another puzzle. And so we can never see what the picture is actually like because no one is working together on the puzzle. They're just coming in at different times, and we don't even know who these other people are. And they're just trying to make the picture with pieces that they found from wherever. But until, you get a major study done like that, people are just going to go around in circles with their own egos, their own stories, and what they want to believe.
Do you think the study of this is ultimately futile?
Well, I think I said that in Interdimensional Universe. And I said, basically, boys and girls, I am not writing about UFOs anymore. Because unless really something else happens or I have contact with aliens or, right. Or if I find the answer, there's nothing I can report here.
Right.
So, so I'm sort of, this is one of the reasons why I'm branching out in other areas of paranormal, areas that have been untouched by UFO investigators, uncontaminated. And that hopefully, you can bring that in and at least open people's minds and say, we have to rethink this, everybody. Put your egos aside, put your ideas that you think it is, and let's start rethinking this whole thing again. Here's the evidence that I've accumulated, and it's just saying that we have to rethink this entire thing. And not only for UFO investigators, but for the general public, too, to rethink the UFO phenomena. And what's happening is that with other paranormal phenomena too, a lot of people are programmed into believing what these things represent because of all these horrible shows on TV.
So when we're talking about ghosts, I mean, we often hear the ghost community talk about residual haunting and intelligent. Do you see any difference in those?
You know, I really don't, because I think for the most part what the ghost hunters are going after is probably they're identifying it as ghosts because, like the ufologists who want to see spaceships, they want to see ghosts. They may be dealing with an interdimensional entity that is manifesting a certain way. And, I mean, you know, it could be possible that these interdimensional beings like to play games. Their favorite game seems to be Fool the Human. Mm-hmm. Now, I have one particular case, for example, that also talks about this idea of relativity, whereas past, present, and future exist together. For example, up in Putnam Valley, this is in my book, Files from the Edge. A person called me up and told me they saw a ghost. And I said, okay. And I went out to see this person, talked to him, lived up in Kent Cliffs, New York. And he said, you know, on a cold February night, he went out for a walk after dinner, and it was dark. It was about 8 o'clock in the evening. And the reservoir over there is frozen at that time, so it's frozen pretty solid. So many people walk across the reservoir during the day. So he decided to go on the ice at night, and he starts walking across. In the distance, he looks and he says the air got really blurry. And then he sees a man walking towards him. And as the man got closer, he realized that the man had black long hair with a pigtail, and he was dressed in, you know, clothes from the 18th century as he got closer. And they stopped and looked at each other, and the man said to him, "Good day, sir." And he says, "How you doing, buddy?" And he looked at him like he's strange. And he said, and the man asked him, "Do you live around here?" And he said, "Yeah, I live over in the house over there." He says, and he asked the fellow, "Are you going to a costume party?" And the fellow said, you know, that was dressed in the 18th century clothes, "No, sir." He said, "You are dressed like you're going to a costume party." Huh. So, and he said, and he noticed that the individual wasn't wearing a coat. He was in a short-sleeve kind of shirt, and he was dressed very lightly for that cold winter evening, which was about 8 degrees. And he says, "Hey, buddy, aren't you cold?" And he goes, "What do you mean, sir? It's July, and the sun is out." And he said, "Well, I thought you were cold walking across the ice." And he said, "Sir, this is not ice. This is a field." And then the individual who was dressed in the 18th century clothes starts, you know, looking at this 21st century individual like he's some kind of lunatic, and runs away from him and disappears in the darkness. Now, this person was convinced that he saw a ghost, but if you do some research in the area, you find out that that reservoir during colonial days, during the 1700s, the late 1700s, was actually a field. And this person was convinced he saw a ghost. However, I bet you that the other person in the 18th century clothes thought he was a ghost or some type of demonic manifestation.
Sure.
The thing is that people who are seeing ghosts, it's very possible that they may be seeing, or it may be times, these rare occasions where the past and our present, and sometimes even the future, merge together in this, you know, four-dimensional space-time continuum around us. So, you know, when we think about this new idea in theoretical physics, we might also have to evaluate the idea of, you know, hauntings and manifestations of ghosts.
Yeah, and that we could be, I guess, effectively. I mean, I always go back to, and I know this is probably a poor example, judging by what people think of these guys lately, but a really old episode of Ghost Hunters had them in a hotel when they walked into a room that was previously occupied in the 1800s, I guess, or early 1900s by a European princess of some sort. They said, are you here, princess? And when they played it back, they could hear her saying, "Of course I am. Where are you?" And I said, this is not a ghost. She is probably sitting at her dressing table, combing her hair, and hears voices in her room.
Reality. Where
exactly.
are you? Yes.
Yeah, and she seemed genuinely perplexed as to why she couldn't see them. And where were these voices coming from? You could just hear it in the voice. I mean, it was the clearest recording I'd ever heard. And I mean, to fake something like that is almost, I mean, how far are you going to go to fake something like that? It's just, I don't know, it was a little too, to kind of coin an old phrase, it's a little too stupid to make up, to have something like that just spontaneously happen. So I don't disagree with you that I think a lot of the ghost stuff is probably across time, splitting of perception to seeing into the past or seeing to the future, and vice versa. But do you then think that has anything to do with the geological area, or does that have more to do with the person?
That's a good question. And I don't really know, but I think it may be a combination of a number of things. I think the geology in the area does have a great deal to do with it. Mm-hmm. I think by manipulating magnetic fields that we can actually cause portals to open or cause manifestations to take place. You have to remember, even if a portal opens up the size of an atom, communication can still be established between the two realities. And this may be happening, especially when we're dealing with some things like EVP. Mm-hmm. Not the fake EVP, but some of the stuff that I've heard and been part of. I mean, I had to sit down and evaluate and analyze all of these signals to finally figure out what's going on here. And with EVP, with these ghost hunters, I mean, nothing cracks me up more than driving by a cemetery and having people going out with these little digital recorders and yelling, "Does anybody want to talk to us?"
Right. I
mean, but the thing is that UFO investigators have been getting EVP on their cassette recorders long before ghost hunters ever perceived the idea. I don't know if you know, but, the UFO research, and they never talked about it like out in public. Back in the old days, back in the early 80s and 70s, we would get this stuff on the recorders. But it was such high strangeness stuff that it wasn't discussed. It was like, where did it come from? I don't know. What's the voice saying? I don't know. But it was never, it was like blasphemy in the UFO circles. You're not supposed to get that stuff. These are aliens, intelligent beings. What are they playing games like this for?
Right.
But
so would you say ufology's largely done it to itself then, hasn't it? I mean, over the course of its history, it's largely painted itself into a corner with the ETH and all of these other nuts and bolts.
Not only painted themselves in the corner, but they build a brick house around themselves.
They
can't
absolutely
see beyond it.
Absolutely. Okay, Jer.
I have a few questions. I guess the first one is, every now and then we get emails saying you've got to talk about djinn, and I noticed that in your book, Files from the Edge, you do talk about the djinn. So tell us what the djinn are and how that might relate to ufology.
Yeah, well, the djinn are a very complex subject, and yes, I do mention it in Interdimensional Universe for the first time, I think, in Western ufology. Interdimensional Universe is a UFO book. Files from the Edge, the djinn are mentioned also. But I have Files from the Edge is out now. I have a book coming out in December called Ultra-Terrestrial Contacts. And then I have another book coming out in January called Djinn, The Hidden Ones.
Huh. Oh, well, there you go.
Now,
we'll have you back.
Yeah, I've been a very busy boy. People used to crack up and say, "Yeah, Phil, produces a book every 5 years." Now, I produced in the last 2 years, I'm producing like 4 of them. Anyway, the djinn, people in the Western Hemisphere don't know about the concept of the jinn. The jinn are called, the word jinn is Islamic. It means the hidden ones, those who are hidden, those who are concealed. And it's not because they're trying to conceal themselves from us, it's because they exist in a space that we can't see. And it talks about the interaction of this race of beings that has existed before the human race and that used to manifest into this world. Now, if you go back into some of the early Islamic literature, the Muslim literature, and also in some of the stories of Solomon, the jinn are mentioned quite frequently. Also in the Quran, the jinn are mentioned quite frequently, like, it's another group of people. The jinn are called by the people in Islam God's other people. And the story says that when Allah, first he made the angels out of light, he made man from the mud and the clay, which means physical, and he made the jinn out of smokeless fire. To me, smokeless fire represents a plasma. You think how logical that is. You have energy, which is light, photonic energy. And then you have the physical universe made of atoms and protons and quarks and so on. And then you have something in between matter and energy, plasma. And the jinn are always shown as smoke, fire, glowing, smokeless fire sometimes, being able to take on physical shape, being able to take not physical shape, appearing in different forms. So if you start applying the idea of this ancient idea of jinn, it makes a lot of sense in the paranormal world that perhaps in some of these cases this is what we're dealing with. There are many classifications of jinn. Some of them are like tricksters. Some of them are very deadly, demonic. And according to Islam, for example, there are no fallen angels. The angels were made of light. They're all pure. The actual troublemakers, the demons, so to speak, the devils, are actually bad jinn. And their concept of Satan is not a fallen angel like in Christianity. It was a fallen jinn, a powerful jinn by the name of Iblis. And if you compare the Islamic version of that fall and the creation of evil and with the Christian version, they're almost identical, except the Islamic version identifies the devil as a jinn, while Christianity identifies the devil as a fallen angel. Now, I've been bouncing around the idea of the jinn in my head for a very, very long time, and the book that's coming out on the jinn is just not, it's not a researched project which I did from my computer or my armchair. In 1995, I spent quite a bit of time in the Middle East. And I was actually doing something else, and I kept on hearing stories of the jinn. And I got very interested in it, which led me from being in Israel into Saudi Arabia, into Oman, and even into parts of Syria. And during that time, I collected quite a bit of information, and back in 1996, 1997, I saw the connection between the possibility of the existence of the jinn and paranormal phenomena, but I really didn't say too much about it because Westerners, when they think of jinn, they don't know what it is. You have to say genie, and all of a sudden Barbara Eden comes into their mind. Or the character played by Robin Williams in Aladdin's lamp comes to mind, and people start laughing. But the jinn are taken very seriously in the Middle East. And they're something that they do not take lightly. To them, like many hardcore Christians believe in demons and so on, the jinn are very real to them. As a matter of fact, it's a possibility that whatever we call demonic or entities like that could be jinn. And we can't think of them in the religious sense like they do in Islam or demons in Christianity. We may be dealing with an intelligent race of beings that exist in a dimension that's close to us, that has existed before the human race. And they may have been interacting with the human race in various stages from time to time since recorded history. And it seems cyclic in nature, whereas sometimes they're able to come into our world more readily than other times. This might explain, for example, that if you look through history, you will see areas, small passages of time, where humans are reporting manifestations of all different types and then it disappears. We may be seeing that again with the increase in paranormal phenomena. The bridge between these dimensions may take place every 1,000 years, or who knows. But it seems that this could be happening again, and maybe in the next 25 years or after another 25 years, the idea of all of these beings that we thought were part of our mythology or our nightmares could be part of our reality again. Obviously, a lot of things are increasing to that nature. But jinn is that's a fascinating subject. They have a very complex society. It's not just a bunch of random ideas. It's an incredible topic to study, and I believe that there are many, many researchers who, especially in the paranormal, are going to pick up on the idea of jinn and start utilizing more, and it's going to be a popular subject in the Western Hemisphere now.
Well, I definitely look forward to having you back on when that book comes out. Yeah. I guess maybe I'll try to ask one more question here. Let's see how broad I can go with this. Now, with all of your travels, I also know that you've studied under the tutelage of a Native American, is it medicine man? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done some episodes on indigenous cultures from the Lakota to the Kogi. And on the one hand, you have someone like a Teokasin Ghost Horse of the Lakota, who speaks from the heart and speaks so eloquently and has a lot of just amazing sort of transcendental things to say. And then on the other hand, in the back of my head, of course, I've always got like the History Channel white guy telling me, this is all superstition. These were cultures that we evolved out of, that sort of thing. What exactly is it that science has conquered in terms of superstition? I mean, would you say that, for instance, some of the things that these indigenous cultures speak to are real, the type of real interdimensional, things that we're talking about here, but that the remedies or the ways of dealing with them might be wrong or superstitious or something? Or do you think that all of that needs to be reevaluated and just take off our Western goggles and accept them as they are on their own terms?
I think we have to look at this, and we have to reevaluate it. First of all, for example, in the early 1800s, doctors from the United States, small United States at that time, they wanted a more communication with Native American medicine men. They wanted to have more of a relationship. They wanted to, find out if there were natural herbs or plants or something that could have medicinal purposes, and that they could utilize, for infection and things like that. So in a meeting, these, doctors, and some of them were military doctors, the medicine man pulls out a pouch, and he says, we use this also for healing. And he pulls out these strange-looking stones. And the doctors look at it and say, yeah, they're strange. I mean, where did you get them? He says, they're star stones. They fell from the sky, from the stars. And the doctors laughed at the medicine man, and they assured him that stones cannot fall from the stars. Well, later on into the 20th century, a lot of these so-called medicine stones, star stones, were gathered up and analyzed, and guess what? They were iron meteorites, iron-based meteorites, siderites, some of them very rare. So, I mean, this is one example right there.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you would talk to your, I don't know, what would he be called? A mentor, a friend? What was he to you?
I'm not exactly sure. He was a friend, a teacher. I wish I could have spent more time with him, but, I was more or less trying to find information about the stone chambers rather than to learn Native American medicine and, the beliefs in magic. But
well, when you talked to him about interdimensional stuff, what was his take on that?
Well, he believed that there were areas that connected another world. And he told me of a number of locations in New York. And the entrances were guarded by trickster, who can actually take on many different shapes to mislead people from finding out the truth as to where the entrance is. And if you look into some of the phenomena that has taken place in some of those areas, it could be that, the trickster is still, working there. I mean, the djinn, the trickster, almost sound like sometimes the same type of entity.
Yeah. Well, and then that gets into, if they're trying to keep us from finding it, is that devious or is that for our benefit?
No, the word djinn, trickster, they try to stay hidden. The trickster, according to Native American, would take on many different shapes like animals and other types of creatures, constantly misleading the medicine man and the people away from his true nature. And according to the Native, he's not evil and he's not good. He does it because of survival. Mm-hmm. So, we were talking earlier about the UFO phenomena and a lot about the paranormal phenomena, how it seems like misleading sometimes. Perhaps these, whatever these beings are, tricksters, jinn, ultra-terrestrials, whatever you want to call them, maybe they don't want us to know their true nature, so they manifest in many different ways to mislead us, like Charlie used to say about the trickster. Because according to him, what he believed is that, all of this UFO stuff is nothing but the manifestations of the trickster.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm trying to get a handle on just even still the star nations. How literally do Native Americans take saying we come from star nations? Since nothing else seems to be as straightforward to them, I can't imagine that they really believe that aliens, came down and they're from another world in a nuts and bolts ETH sort of way. Do you have any insight into that?
Not really. From what I've heard is that, from the information I picked up, is that they believe in spirits. They're manifestations of different types of spirits, and that human beings are the Native Americans, the Indians. They are the human beings, but everything outside of that is, from a spirit world. Mm-hmm. I mean, the idea of ETs and stuff like that is not in their concept, but they do believe in greatly in an idea of another world, another dimension, another world that's close to us, where a lot of these entities and spirits and forces do live that do interact with our world and some selected people.
We don't know the magician. We're not quite sure what the trick is, but you've been studying the sleight of hand for quite some time. What does it mean to you at this point?
Well, what it means to me is that unless the magician comes down and shows me how the trick is done, I'm never going to find out. We're three-dimensional beings trying to understand, an 11-dimensional universe. And, It's like, it's like living inside of a pipe and never getting to see the outside and try to figure out what the outside is like. I mean, it just can't be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think that that's on purpose? I mean, do you think that there is a learning experience going on here on purpose from their end, or do you think that any sort of learning experience we garner is just incidental?
Native American Medicine Council says one thing about that, talk about the knowledge and the wisdom of Native Americans, is that we are limited, human beings are limited in what they can see and what they can perceive for their own protection. So maybe that means that we have to, as human beings, must learn more about the true nature of the universe so that we can conquer our own fears and really understand it and become part of it. But right now, human beings on this planet, when they encounter something that takes them out of their secure reality, many people become fearful. Mm-hmm. And that's dangerous when human beings become very fearful. So perhaps it's done for our own protection. Perhaps it's done for some malicious purpose. I don't know.
Very good. Well, Phil, once again, thank you for coming on the show and
yes. You're welcome.
Giving us the goods. And our mutual friend Harold Egeln said that you had made the offer to once again go out to the Stone Chambers and will we be going to Hawk Rock this time?
Yes, Hawk Rock is another story there, and there's a lot going on out there. And, I had a group out there spend the night out there, and we've had some experiences there, which are truly remarkable.
I wonder, is there something, how many people are you willing to take out there? If we had a couple of listeners come along, would that be doable, or is that too much?
No, it's doable. I mean, me, I'm pretty open to just about anything. It's a little bit of a walk, so whoever, comes out has to be in at least moderate physical condition. I mean,
excluding me.
We're out.
I mean, you have to be able to walk at least a couple of miles in the woods. I mean,
right.
Cool.
That I can do. All right. Well, there you go, listeners. First come, first serve. All right. Well, Phil, thank you very much once again.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
It's always
a pleasure.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's always informative to talk to you, and it always gives me hope that there is at least a good researcher left.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I try to keep my wits about me, but who knows, That's about who you talk to. The devil to some people and, an angel to others,
Yes.
Do you have a website that you want people to go to?
No, I don't have a website. People can contact me at bell1313@yahoo.com, BEL, if they want to write to me. But I don't have a website. Everybody's trying to say, Phil, you got to get a website. You got to get a website. Yeah, right. I try to avoid attention sometimes. I'm going to put myself all over the internet more than I'm there already.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you've got 3 books coming out in a year's time, I think you're doing okay without a website.
Yeah, I think I'm happy the way I am.
Very good. All right, man. Take care.
Okay, bye. This is Colin Andrews, and you're listening to Paratopia.
Esoteric research and investigation into the enigmatic. Eerie Radio is a weekly podcast that features interviews with the world's leading paranormal researchers. Download episodes of Eerie Radio from your favorite podcatcher or directly from the show website at www.eerieradio.com. Eerie Radio. Listen, learn, laugh.
Hey, this is Stacy.
This is Wes.
Be sure to check us out on the Black Fridays podcast,
where we explore the esoteric one conversation at a time.
You can check us out at www.theblackfridays.net. It's a little bit freaky.
And we will see you there.
So the Jeffrey.
So the Jer.
How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm doing well.
That was a fascinating interview.
It
with
was
one
indeed.
Phil Imbrogno. Yes, very good.
He's always fascinating. That's why I
I
like
enjoyed that immensely.
Phil Imbrogno. Yeah, the one thing I didn't really pick up on in a way that was useful would be his explanation of gravity going through possibly other dimensions before it hits the Earth, and that's why it's a weaker force than it should be. So, if that's true, if there are these other dimensions that a force is going in and out of, then does that mean that we are bonded to those other dimensions by said force? And does that explain the going in and out of reality so quickly of things like UFOs and ghosts and that sort of thing? Is it like, do they appear to us sort of as a shimmering because they're weaving in and out of dimensions to our eye? To their eye, it's just business as usual.
I'm sorry, how's that? There's no answer to that question. What do I know? Do I look like a physicist to you? Go ahead, ask the question again.
You can just say good question.
One?
Really, what parts did you like? Let's talk about the parts you liked.
I enjoyed that part about gravity coming from the sun.
Is that right? Because that's the part I like too. I'm glad you mentioned that because I thought it was maybe applicable to this whole paranormal thing. If he's got a force that's weaving in and out of dimensions before it hits the Earth, and that's what makes it a weaker force than it should be, then what else can weave in and out of those dimensions?
A lot of dimensions going on there.
A lot of dimensions. A lot of the word dimension in what I just said.
Good question, but
I feel you don't believe that it's a good question.
No, there's a lot of supposition in there. I don't exactly know what, how do you define dimension, first of all?
Well, if you've got 11 dimensions, I mean, it's going by the string theory thing, right?
Yeah, it's all weaving through that string thing.
So if you're weaving through the string thing, then it's like a flickering light, or it would be like
Mirage,
or like a movie where you're seeing the frames, and it's missing some frames.
Exactly.
And they're seeing the movie.
Right.
Maybe something like that. I mean, it's possible.
It makes sense.
I mean, it makes sense out of like your old condo where you would just see like an arm floating by or in oblong shape moving on the floor.
Well, I think what and I've seen this myself, as well as heard it from other people, that more often than not, when they see some sort of either it's an apparition or some kind of form moving around their general environment, that the light in the room does not reconcile itself to the light on the object that they're observing. In other words, that light looks like the object or whatever they're seeing seems to be lit from a completely different light source than what should be normal for the room or normal for the environment, which I think is interesting in that respect of what you just mentioned with the physics of the dimensions and all that. So, I mean, all really good questions. There's no answers, I don't think, there yet that we can get our heads around, but it's an interesting thought.
I really like that Phil is a guy who's got the science background. He's got the Native American medicine man conversations.
He's a very eclectic guy.
Yeah, and whatever he was doing in the Middle East, spying for the U.S., no doubt. I don't know what he was doing in the Middle East, but I mean, just all of that real world experience and conversations that surely he's had with all sorts of people to inform his opinions about things. Yeah, I can't think of a more well-rounded researcher, actually, off the top of my head.
He's not an armchair guy. I mean, he actually gets out there and does something. So, and the more I see, the more I think that that's a rarity anymore.
And completely willing to give tours for free of these stone chambers and of these Native American sites. I mean, just incredible. The man loves to teach.
Yeah.
And that's it. I wish. Yeah. Why aren't more people like that? I don't get it. I'm back to my innocent, childish questions, my naivete about humanity. It's like, why are people in this for ego when you're considered the fringe? There's nothing here for your ego.
Right.
There's nothing that will do you good.
You're going to play that big shot stuff, you play it all the way, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's a guy that I could talk to for hours about just the way ufology seems to work and the way people in it seem to interact with each other. I mean, I'd written you a rather lengthy email of, I don't know, just a ramble on ufology, on the way it reacts to new ideas or to even in some cases reconstituted ideas, which I think is mostly what I, have ridden on for a while. That I mean, I don't think I've said anything all that new to this stuff. I think that most of what I find out that I think is interesting comes from the Jacques Vallée direction. That sort of, or even George Hansen. I mean, I quote him more than enough, but I mean, there's another guy that I think has got such a great handle on the finer details that I think need to be examined a lot closer.
And we're hearing his name pop up more and more. So
absolutely,
he's definitely getting out there. And I just want to say, the email that you're talking about that you wrote, I mean, this is something that you might be posting on the forum soon. And you sent it to me, and I just thought it was really weird how a lot of the language you use in that email is exactly what Phil used. I mean, it was like some of the same topics that we're talking about, and some of the exact same language. It was almost like you wrote that in sort of psychically knowing what this conversation was going to be. It was weird.
Well, I mean, I just want to read this this one part, where, and it's in the very beginning. It has no bearing on the overall gist of this article. I said, any time that a dissenting view or a major altercation of views on certain facets of the UFO study comes up, it's an inheritable fact that there will be detractors from the other side. And when I approached you with the notion of doing this show, it was not just to become another paranormal talk show, but one that might have a positive impact on the study and point out new directions and aspects long dismissed and ignored by even the staunchest UFO-related personalities. Ultimately, we're at a crossroads in the study of the UFO subject. The long-held views by what's been called the old guard are being questioned as never before, and new ideas are being introduced. As well, some aspects in the common methodologies of study are being questioned and debated as to their veracity and legitimacy. And that's absolutely the truth. I mean, Phil, in as much said today, that whenever you come out with something that goes against the grain of what could we call it a cabal of ufology? Can we title it that? I don't know.
Sure.
But there does seem to be this this gentleman's club of ufology that to go against that grain of what they're putting out is to be considered a heretic in this field. And I still that still amazes me. I can't figure out why, in a field like this where anything and everything is largely possible, why so many people would just turn on somebody for either proposing something new or questioning what is allegedly established.
Well, this is what where I think it gets into, all right, we've got this uphill battle of presenting this to the public in a way that they won't mock.
Right.
So the only way to really do that is to have our story and stick to it. And if you're going to deviate from that story, then crap, we don't have a story that they can't laugh at.
Right.
I think it's that simple,
Well, and I think it also not only comes from that direction, but I think it comes from, I think there are very few people in ufology that have done things that I'm talking about serious people. I'm talking about people that you would have a certain amount of respect for. I think there are a few of them that feel what they are doing is not right. I feel like the majority of guys who are in this, who are serious about it, feel like what they're doing, they feel like it is the right thing to do. Whether it is or not is a completely different matter. But then those people latch onto a theory or a line of thought in studying this and are afraid to then expand on it in the direction that it should be expanded upon. And therefore it becomes this stagnated, as much as I have respect for Stanton Friedman, I think of someone who I feel like is a stagnant entity in ufology. I feel like he really has been on the same thing for years, you know. And I think he possibly could have, you know, with the tenacious guy that he is, I think he could have gone in different directions with this and had a lot more to say about it. Mm-hmm. But I feel like somebody like him is probably, again, married so closely to the theory that he's proposed for so many years that it would be nigh impossible for him to turn that around at this point in his career. And I think that's what we encounter with a lot of people in this. They get married to a theory and then they cannot back out of it, because to back out of it, like Phil says, is to go against the religion that ufology has built itself into.
Yeah, it's just weird to me how the things that have been deemed acceptable, I mean, it makes sense to me that the ETH would be deemed acceptable because that's the first theory to come along that would make sense to people, you know, way back when. But then the disclosure thing, that whole angle, doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it doesn't even make sense to me even if they were right. Like, by its own rules of logic, it doesn't make sense to me that the big bad evil government is going to disclose anything to us because they are the big bad evil government.
Right.
So I don't understand why that is considered credible in its own vast circles around the globe, you know? I mean, certainly characters in it are buffoons. Probably all of them are buffoons, but certain ones stand out. But the movement in general is sort of taken as a real valid movement in many cases.
Yeah, well, it's certainly gotten a lot of attention. I mean, if nothing else.
But, I mean, it goes, again, it goes with, here's an answer that you can understand. Here's a concrete answer that you can understand.
Right.
I also think if it does end up being some interdimensional thing that needs us to perceive it, that once again gets back to, well, gee, maybe the big bad government ain't so big and bad after all. Maybe whoever knows about it knows that we need to not focus on it for reality to remain the way it is. And they're just not willing to take the chance on destroying all that we have created for the sake of this interaction. I mean, that's a possibility, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Phil is right when you say that this field won't turn around largely due to ego and celebrity. That celebrity status that some of them get. I mean, and no matter how small that celebrity status may be in the overall big picture, like he said, some people that you see on the History Channel would be complete unknowns were it not for this. And he's right. That's exactly right. So I think people are trying to protect their celebrity status. And
well, you know what? And to that end, look at what TV, I mean, the TV producers demand that you say certain things to be on TV. And that's just a fact. You know, when the History Channel approached me to be on their 2012 special, I mean, I told them what I would talk about and what I wouldn't talk about. And of course, they wanted me to talk about the things that I had no interest in. Because that was sort of the angle they were going with. Now, of course, those sorts of angles are always the most spectacular and the easiest to say in a soundbite. And the truth is always more complicated, or, you know, sort of the possibilities of truth, I guess I should say, in that in terms of 2012, are always more complicated. But, I mean, to me, they're more fascinating. But then again, to flesh them out would take probably an episode. And that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to get in a whole bunch of doomsday scenarios all at once. And so it is with UFOs. We need to cram in as much information in this direction, that direction, the other direction to keep someone's attention, and ultimately learn nothing. And ultimately, the end of all of these things, what do they say? Well, we'll never know. You know, we don't know what the answer is, but, you know, tune in next week.
Yeah, well, it's preaching to the lowest common denominator again. I mean,
so
there is,
doesn't that inform research? I mean, don't you then have to tailor your research to a market, and that market is dictated by these producers?
Well, yeah, in some ways, the media and the outlet that you're going to use is going to dictate how you can present it. Sure. But I think, you know, you also look at, you know, if you were just getting into this today and your goal was to be a media personality in this field, I mean, if that was your goal, to get on the History Channel and to do all these things, and let me tell you something, folks, it's not hard to get on the History Channel. Not in this subject, anyway. I mean, they called my dumbass for O'Hare, And it, like Jeremy wanted me to say that the photograph I was examining was an unknown. And what was unknown about it was, yeah, the object was unknown, but there was also a bigger story there, which was someone had tampered with it. Not the object itself, but some part of the picture had been tampered with. That's a bigger story than the picture is. So yeah, I completely sympathize with that. But if you were going to go into this with that kind of mentality that you're going to become known within this field to be a media personality, then ultimately what they would tell you, yes, would dictate what you say on the air, but it was all based on how successful that program was. You would also tailor everything else that you would ever put out on the subject to that kind of mentality, because that's what you think people want. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we've talked about this before. Like, why couldn't we put together a paranormal show that is more in depth than the average? And we both decided it probably won't work. Because that's not what people want.
Well, it's not what producers
ultimately
want.
people want a Reader's Digest. Yeah, it's a Reader's Digest version.
I don't think people get about TV, because they always want to say that these, at least in this field, generally want to say producers, Hollywood is influenced by the government and blah, 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 because, of course, yesteryear that was true. You know, hey, go do this sci-fi movie and make it about communism subliminally, or whatever. But nowadays, it really is like, what will that channel accept as a format? That's one. You know, you have to edit to the stylings of the channel. Mm-hmm. And so that is first, and secondary to that is anything you're going to learn in the show. So if they want, a quickly edited, fast-paced, like a UFO Hunters, where it's so quickly paced that you can't even see what the hell you're looking at,
right?
What are you going to do? You're stuck doing that. And, I remember people saying, like, well, Bill Burns, isn't he a producer on that show? Doesn't he have the say? But that's not the kind of producer he is. The people who have the say aren't Bill Burns and Nancy Burns, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so you have to conform. You have to conform to the channel standards. You have to, and then you have to also remember that most of these producers, they don't care about these subjects. Right. This isn't about depth and caring about anything. This is about advertisement revenue.
Revenue, right, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I was recently on Erie Radio, and they were talking about, are we reaching the end of the line with these paranormal shows? And I said, unfortunately, I don't think we are. I think as long as people are willing to watch this stuff, and it is of interest to a lot of people, and I give it credit for bringing it so far into the public eye as it has. But the question is, what kind of eye has it been given it? How well are people informed by watching these shows? They go out with some unrealistic expectation of what to expect in an investigative capacity. You're really not getting a very good picture watching it on TV. So all of that's that's just a big mess. All of it's a big mess. I certainly don't say that media dictates all of how this field works, but certainly attention of the public in one way or another, whether it be a lecture hall or a book or a TV show, all of that's going to dictate what your next book is going to be about. I think there's few people like Phil Imbrogno around who say, I don't care about ufology anymore. For as long as he's been in it, he's like, I'm done. There's not any answers that are going to come from there. And I think that's what we said at the very beginning of this show was, before episode 1, I think, even came out, there's not going to be any answers coming out of ufology. It's going to have to come from bringing non-paranormal, guests on this show, people of multiple disciplines to talk about this in different ways, or at least entertain it. And I think we've done that pretty well so far. So anyway, Jeremy, I was looking through my Gmail account this week, and I noticed that I had Google alerts for UFO, and that particular morning, the Seattle Times local news, and this is for March 27th, 2010, published at 10 p.m. CIA concludes study of UFOs futile. How's that? It's a 17-page report available on the CIA's website, acknowledges the futility of investigating UFOs by the government agency. That might be interesting to mention, eh?
Yeah, what does futility mean?
Essentially what the report says is, it says, quote, like the JFK assassination conspiracy theories, the UFO issue will probably not go away soon, no matter what the agency does or says. The belief that we are not alone in the universe is too emotionally appealing, and the distrust of our government is too pervasive to make the issue amenable to traditional scientific studies or rational explanation of evidence. So basically they're saying, why would we study this? It's futile because who'd believe us anyway?
Well, what about...
Who would trust the findings?
Yeah, well, they have a point there. But someone's got to study it, at least from the NARCAP point of view of this is, this could be a national security interest. What if we mistake them for terrorists or something?
Well, I'm still reading it, actually. I mean, it was published in 2007 by Gerald K. Haynes, who is the historian for the National Reconnaissance Office.
And this is just being published now?
Apparently it just came out. This, like I said, this news story is from the 27th of March, originally published on Saturday. So it must be relatively new, at least. So it says in this, and once again, this is from the Seattle Times. It says that in the 17 pages, Haynes put together what reads as an objective, a thorough history of the CIA and UFOs. Not that anything the CIA says, well researched as it may be by a historian, will change many minds. As Haynes says in his report, an extraordinary 95% of all Americans have heard of UFOs and 57% believe they are real. But apparently their idea was it's worthless to study this because anything that we would find out, the public wouldn't believe anyway, coming from us.
But you could say that about anything with the CIA.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, really?
I know.
It doesn't stop them from releasing reports.
No, certainly not. Or a study. I mean, I'd love to see the study. So I'm going to be reading that. Maybe we'll talk about that next episode.
Very nice. And finally, will you be coming with us to Hawk Rock?
Yeah, I'll go. Sure.
Should we do something for the listeners?
How about this? How about everyone who comes to the message board, www.paratopia.net, message board link will be on your right-hand side. Come there, register, post in this show thread. We will take all of those names, put them in a hat, and if you just put it in the post, I would like to be included in the drawing, because I don't think people from Oregon will be joining us. Or the Swiss Alps, or Japan. Although, if you'd like to, we have no problem with that. We'll draw 2 names out of the hat, and those people can come along.
Sure, that sounds
good. It'll be fun.
Just remember that you have to be able to trek through 2 miles of woods.
Well, I may be taking a 4-wheeler.
If I can do it, you can do it.
I'm not talking about the physical stamina needed to get there. I'm talking about the need to get out if something weird happens.
Yeah. One last thing. We were going to do sort of an Emma Woods wrap-up this week, but we've decided to move it to next week because Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs are actually going to be appearing on another show to do a hypnosis roundtable.
Right.
A roundtable on whether hypnosis is a valid, useful tool. So that ought to be, well, something that we've already dealt with several episodes ago. But nevertheless, right. This will be David Jacobs finally speaking since the Emma Woods debacle here. Yeah. And I'm sure we're going to have lots to say about it. So I figure we'll get all that in next week, along with our own strange experiences and whatever the hell else we end up talking about.
I don't know if it's going to be strange experiences, but it's certainly going to be a little bit about the state of ufology.
Well, no, I've got the strange experience I had over at your place that I teased that I would talk about this week, but I didn't.
Why don't you talk about it now?
Well, because this show is 3 hours long.
Really? God, the time just flew.
It does. It flies when I'm with you.
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed this show a lot. And thanks to Phil Imbrogno again for coming on and talking with us about his new book. And teasing his other new book.
Several new books.
I'm looking forward to that one, too.
Yes, the new book, which I will be reviewing for UFO Magazine, I do believe, if the publisher sends me the copy, is Files from the Edge, a paranormal investigator's exploration into high strangeness.
Sounds good. Phil Imbrogno is our kind of guy.
Highly strange?
No, pretty much talks about all of it and doesn't care where the chips fall.
This is what it looks like when a down-to-earth man talks about high strangeness from the sky.
Right.
Huh?
What?
Nothing.